After my dad died, my mom said, "You're just like him, a failure." I laughed until she publicly shamed me at his funeral. The next day, my ex posted a video of her mocking me with my mom in the background. It started at my dad's funeral. I was trying to say a few words, nothing dramatic, just a quiet tribute. My voice cracked. I laughed, a nervous habit. That's when my mother stood up and announced to everyone that I was, just like your father, a failure. It stunned the room. The next day, my ex-girlfriend posted a video of herself mocking my speech, with my mom right next to her, laughing. That was the day I realized just how toxic the two most important women in my life had become. "Of course you couldn't even finish the speech," Mom said, sipping her coffee. "Your father always choked too." Sadie chuckled from the driver's seat. "He tried to cry. It was so awkward. You should have seen the way his face twisted." They both laughed. That's what the video showed. That's what the world saw. And that's when something in me snapped. I'm 41. No kids. No wife. A solid but quiet life in Tacoma, Washington. I work as a mechanic and live in a 2-bedroom rental on the south side. Nothing fancy, but it's mine. My dad, Howard, passed away last summer from lung cancer. The kind that creeps in slowly and takes a piece of the person every week until there's nothing left but a shadow of who they were. He was a good man. Not a loud man. Definitely not a rich one. But honestly, when I was a kid, he'd pick me up from middle school in a rusted-out Ford, and we'd go to the docks just to watch ships leave. That was his idea of bonding. It was simple. Quiet. Perfect. Mom, Greta, was never really on the same page as Dad. Or me. She had standards. High ones. Appearance mattered. Status mattered. She worked in real estate and always surrounded herself with people who made her look good. We never lived in luxury, but she carried herself like we did. I think she resented both of us. For not being more. For not trying harder. For being a mirror to the life she felt stuck in. When Dad got sick, she didn't slow down. Didn't change. I moved back in for a bit to help with the hospice setup. She left most of it to me. Barely looked in his direction. Sometimes I'd walk into the room and find her watching game shows while he was gasping for air. I'd turn to her and she'd just shrug. "He always said he didn't want to die in a hospital," she'd say. "This is what he wanted." He died on a Monday afternoon. I was the one who found him. He was in the recliner, TV on. Just gone. I sat with him for a while before I called anyone. Mom didn't cry. Didn't even flinch. When I told her, she nodded and kept chopping onions. He always said he'd die watching that nonsense. That was it. That was her farewell. We arranged the funeral for that weekend. It was going to be small, he didn't have many close friends by the end. Some neighbors came. A few cousins flew in from Oregon. I didn't expect Sadie to show up. Sadie and I had split up 2 years earlier. She was ambitious, climbing the ladder at some marketing agency in Seattle. I was. Well, not. She wanted the high-rise condo, the Tesla, the weekends in Napa. I was more of a backyard barbecue, truck with a cracked windshield kind of guy. We tried. We really did. But we wanted different lives. What I didn't know was that after we broke up, she kept in touch with my mom. I found out later they'd bonded over drinks and gossip. Apparently, it was my favorite topic. At the service, I tried to give a short eulogy. Nothing elaborate. Just a few memories of Dad fishing, his corny jokes, the way he'd always start snoring during movie nights. But I couldn't get the words out. I got choked up. My voice cracked. I gave a little awkward laugh to reset. That's when my mother stood up from the front row and said, "You're just like him. Can't finish anything. What a waste." Loud enough for everyone to hear. I froze. People stared. A few gasped. I looked out at the faces, some unsure whether to react, others clearly horrified. Sadie smirked. She didn't look surprised. I couldn't speak. Couldn't think. I just stepped down from the podium and walked out of the church into the rain. The next morning, I was scrolling through Instagram, still dazed from the day before. That's when I saw it. Sadie had posted a story. She was sitting in her car, parked outside the church, recounting the funeral. She mimicked my choked-up voice, fake sobbing into the camera. He tried to cry. Didn't even get past the first sentence. Then she turned the phone. My mother was sitting beside her, sipping coffee. Laughing. He's just like Howard, Mom said. Soft. A joke, really. They both burst into laughter. I stared at the video until the screen timed out. Played it again. And again. My hands were shaking. That was when something inside me hardened. Not rage exactly. Something colder. Sadie had cheated on me before we broke up. I never confronted her. Just let it end. I saw the texts. I saw the photos. A guy named Ruben. I guess I was too tired to fight for something already dying. Mom. Well, I knew her secrets too. Back when I was staying with them to help Dad, I found a stash of donation envelopes in her desk, ones marked for the local church committee. Unopened. With cash inside. I asked Dad about it once. He looked away and muttered, "Leave it be, son. She'll tear everything apart." But now? What was left to tear? I saved the video before it could disappear. I sent it, anonymously, to Sadie's HR department at the marketing firm. Told them she'd posted mocking footage from a funeral she wasn't even invited to. It didn't take long. I heard through a mutual friend that she got fired. Something about behavior unbecoming of a representative. I didn't gloat. I just watched her post a sad, tear-streaked video about being misunderstood and targeted. Comments were turned off. Then I printed out copies of those donation envelopes and sent them to the church board. With them, I included bank statements showing large cash deposits to my mom's account, always on a Monday after Sunday service. No explanation. Just the facts. A week later, she was removed from the committee and publicly reprimanded. Word got around fast. Tacoma isn't a big town when it comes to gossip. Her realtor friends distanced themselves. Her calendar dried up. She called me once. I let it ring. She left a voicemail, "I know what you did. I hope you're happy. You've always been such a little coward." I didn't respond. I moved out of the family home shortly after. Sold it, actually. Didn't tell her until the paperwork went through. She was staying in a retirement condo by then. Said she didn't need that dusty old place anymore. The new owners called her when they found a piano in the garage with a tag reading Greta's. She was livid. I felt nothing. I hadn't planned to burn the bridge with her. That was never the goal. But after that funeral, after that video, there was nothing left to salvage. It wasn't just grief. It wasn't a moment of misplaced emotion. It was a pattern that had finally exposed itself fully, without disguise. The performance was over. The masks were off. People talk about closure like it's something neat. A bow you tie on a messy situation and tuck away. But this wasn't closure. This was disconnection, willing and complete. A final acknowledgement that biology does not bind you to someone who has only ever torn you down. I kept working at the auto shop. Business didn't change. Neither did the hours. But something in me did. The way I carried myself. I stopped looking down when I spoke. Started saying no more. Took breaks without guilt. There's something quietly powerful about realizing the people who convinced you were small no longer hold any weight in your life. A few weeks after the fallout, I ran into Sadie's sister at a Safeway. We weren't close, but she recognized me by the frozen peas. She's telling everyone you hacked her account, she said, one eyebrow raised. I shook my head. Let her. She paused, looked me over like she hadn't really seen me before. She's not doing great. Says your mom hasn't returned any of her calls either. That made me blink. Apparently, once the social blowback hit, Greta had ghosted Sadie too. Threw her under the bus when things got serious. Classic. You okay? Her sister asked before walking off. I'm better than I've been in years. I started spending more time at home. It wasn't lonely, more peaceful. I picked up old hobbies I'd shelved years ago. Woodworking in the garage. Smoking meat on weekends. Simple things, but they gave me a rhythm, a reason to move forward. Once a month, I'd drive to Mountain View Cemetery. I'd bring peanut butter cookies, the kind Dad liked, and sit by his grave. No big speeches. Just some silence. Maybe an update about a new carburetor I was rebuilding or a joke I'd heard at work. One afternoon, I told him about the video. About what Mom said. What she'd always said. She didn't love you, I muttered. But I did. And I still do. The wind picked up like an answer. About 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. It was from my mom. A handwritten note, on that expensive stationery she always used. The handwriting was shaky. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even want it. I want you to know I was always harder on you because you reminded me of him. Not in the way I said. In the way I felt. You two had your own world. I was never invited. I hated it. I hated you for it. That's on me. I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you should know. There was no signature. Just that. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it, put it back in the envelope, and left it in a drawer. I haven't opened it since. A part of me wanted to write back. Another part still sees her at that funeral, standing up in front of everyone to shame her own son. Laughing in that car with Sadie like a high school press. That image doesn't go away just because you scrawl a few half-hearted admissions onto paper. I did check in on her once. Quietly. I called the senior complex under a fake name, said I was an old friend. They said she still lived there. Alone. No visitors. Quiet life. Bingo on Wednesdays. I left it at that. Sometimes I wonder what Dad would have said about all this. I think he would have told me to let it go. That anger's just a rock in your shoe, and carrying it only makes the journey harder. But this doesn't feel like anger. It feels like distance. The necessary kind. A few nights ago, I dreamt I was back at the funeral. This time, I didn't try to speak. I just walked up to the podium, looked out over the pews, and said nothing. People stared. Whispers rose. Then I looked down, and Dad was there. Sitting in the front row. Smiling. That's it. No words. Just that. I woke up lighter than I'd felt in months. It's strange how peace doesn't come in one big wave. It creeps in, unannounced, like sunlight through closed blinds. Small things start to shift. The quiet becomes bearable. Then it was comforting. Then, one day, you realize you haven't thought about them in weeks. And when you do, it doesn't sting, it just is. But there were still days when the weight hit me out of nowhere. A smell, a sound, a stray thought. A woman at the post office wearing my mom's perfume made me stop mid-sentence. I stood there, letter in hand, forgetting what I was doing. Those little moments, they linger. I took on a few extra hours at the shop. Not because I needed the money, but because it helped to stay busy. The guys there didn't ask about the funeral or my family. They never pressed. That silence, the kind that doesn't demand answers, became something I appreciated more than I expected. One evening after closing, I was wiping down a workbench when my boss, Melvin, came over. He was in his 60s, the kind of guy who'd seen everything twice and didn't waste time pretending he hadn't. He leaned on the edge of the table and said, "You're quieter these days." Not in a bad way. Just different. I nodded. Just sorting some things out. He didn't ask what. Just handed me a cold beer from the fridge we weren't technically supposed to have in the shop. We stood there in silence, watching the rain slide down the window. That moment felt more healing than any conversation I'd had in the past year. About 2 months after the letter from Mom, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. "Hey. This is Sadie. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For the funeral. For the video. For everything. I was angry, and I made it worse. I lost my job. I lost a lot. I know that's my own fault. I just wanted you to know I regret it." I stared at it for a while. It didn't feel satisfying. It didn't feel like closure. It felt like someone trying to clean their conscience without picking up a broom. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because there was nothing left to say. A few days later, I went back to the old house, not to visit, just to drive by. The new owners had painted it blue. The porch swing was gone, replaced with modern outdoor chairs. There were kids' bikes on the lawn. It didn't feel like our house anymore. And for the first time, that was a relief. I parked across the street for a while, engine running, and thought about the years I'd spent inside those walls. The arguments. The silences. The heavy air that always hung between me and my mother. But also the late nights with Dad, watching westerns. The smell of his coffee. His humming while he made breakfast on Sundays. That house held both versions of my life, the painful and the peaceful. And now, neither belonged to me. I didn't need them to. I started taking night classes at Clover Park Technical. Nothing fancy, just a business course or two. I figured if I was ever going to open my own shop, I should at least understand how taxes worked. My classmates were younger, mostly fresh out of high school, but I didn't mind. I wasn't there to make friends. I was there to move forward. One night after class, I pulled into a diner for a late dinner. A woman at the counter was arguing with the waitress about her check. She had a familiar sharpness in her tone, clipped words, condescending sighs. For a moment, I thought of Greta. I caught her eye when I passed. She scowled, then turned back to her receipt, still muttering under her breath. I sat at a booth and ordered coffee and a sandwich. As I waited, I kept glancing back at her. Not because I was curious, but because I recognized the energy. That desperate need to be seen, to be right, to be better. It didn't scare me anymore. It made me sad. Because I realized, for the first time, that my mother wasn't strong. She was terrified. Of being forgotten. Of not mattering. Of the quiet. She'd spent her life turning that fear into sharpness. And it cost her everything. Later that week, I got a voicemail from one of the church ladies. Mrs. Taggart. She was in her 80s and had always been one of the only kind people around my mom back in the day. "I heard about what happened last year," she said. "I just wanted to say, I always saw how she treated you. It wasn't right. And your father. He was a good man. I hope you know that." I saved that voicemail. I don't know why. Maybe just to remind myself that I hadn't imagined it all. I never responded to Sadie's message. And I never wrote back to my mother. Some people might think that's cold. That forgiveness is about healing, not them. Maybe they're right. But sometimes healing isn't about forgiving the person who hurt you. It's about understanding that they don't have power over you anymore. I still visit Dad. Still bring cookies. Still talk to him like he's sitting right there. Because in some ways, he is. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I've finally started living a life that's mine, not the one I was born into. Not the one I was expected to fix. Just mine. Winter came earlier than usual that year. I remember because I was under a car, trying to fix a seized brake caliper when the first flurry of snow blew in through the open shop bay. That cold air always carries something with it, memories, mostly. And even though I'd been moving on, those memories had a habit of creeping back in when the temperature dropped. That December, I got an unexpected call. Not from Greta. Not from Sadie. But from my cousin Lyle, Dad's sister's boy. We hadn't talked since the funeral. He lived down near Eugene and had stayed mostly out of family drama. He was the type who preferred to fix things with his hands, not words, much like Dad. "Hey," he said, his voice careful. "I ran into your mom." I didn't respond right away. I just listened. She was at some estate thing, fundraiser or auction, I think. Didn't look good. Walked with a cane now. Looked thinner. A lot thinner. I stayed silent. She asked about you. I didn't say much. Just that you were working, still in Tacoma. Still, I said nothing. She didn't ask for your number or anything. Just asked if you ever talked about her. That sat with me. Heavy and strange. Not because I felt sorry for her, but because I realized that the version of her Lyle saw was new. Change, maybe. Or maybe just unraveling. I thanked him and hung up. And then I sat in my truck for almost 20 minutes, staring out the windshield, trying to figure out why my stomach had twisted up like that. The holidays came and went. I spent Christmas with a coworker's family. Melvin invited me over, said his sister made a roast the size of a car tire. I brought beer and a fruitcake no one touched. We watched old movies. It was loud and warm and full of laughter, the kind of night I hadn't experienced in years. No pressure. No guilt. Just belonging. I didn't check my phone that night. Didn't check my email. Didn't think about Mom or Sadie or anything from the past year. But the next morning, when I finally did look, there was an email sitting in my inbox. No subject line. The sender just read, g.realtor.tacoma at. I knew immediately who it was from. I almost deleted it. Almost. But I clicked. I'm not asking you to talk to me. I don't expect that. But I wanted you to know something. Your father loved you. He told me that every day toward the end. Even when I didn't want to hear it. He said you were the best thing he ever did. I didn't believe him then. I do now. You were right to walk away. I think maybe I finally understand why. I'm sorry. There was no plea for reconnection. No demand. Just that. And still. I didn't know what to do with it. I printed it out. Folded it carefully. And tucked it in the same drawer where I kept her letter. It didn't change anything. But it made something quieter inside me. Work kept me grounded. My boss started letting me handle more administrative stuff. I found myself in charge of parts ordering, inventory, sometimes even payroll. It wasn't official, but I was basically running the place when Melvin wasn't around. One evening he pulled me aside. "Have you ever thought about starting your own shop?" he asked. All the time, I admitted. He nodded like he'd been waiting to hear me say it. "If you're serious, I've got a guy. Commercial property over on Pine. Small lot. I need work. But it's something." I told him I'd think about it. And I did. 4 weeks. I drove past that lot 3 or 4 times a week, imagining what it could be. Not what anyone else wanted from me. Just what I wanted to build, brick by brick. That spring, I was at the cemetery again. Cookies in hand. Talking to Dad. "I think I'm gonna do it," I said. The shop. My own place. Not big. But enough. The wind was calm that day. The sun is low and golden. And in that moment, I felt something shift again. Not dramatic. Just steady. Like something long unmoored had finally settled into place. And then I said something I hadn't been able to say out loud in almost a year. I'm doing okay. I meant it. And I think he knew. The next week, I went to look at the lot on Pine Street. It was rough, cracked pavement, a faded for-lease sign, and a building that hadn't seen paint in a decade. But it had potential. I walked around, taking it all in. The bones were good. The bay doors still rolled up with a little coaxing. The office space smelled like mildew, but the sunlight still poured in through the dusty blinds. It was a fixer, no doubt. But so was I. And I was ready to start rebuilding. It took me 4 months to negotiate the lease and get the permits. For more to gut the place and bring it back to life. I didn't have much in savings, so I did most of the work myself, patched walls, laid flooring, installed shelving. Some of the guys from the shop pitched in on weekends, and Melvin even helped me set up the lifts. Said he was investing in the next generation. I called the place Harbor and Sons Auto. Even though I didn't have kids, the name felt right. It honored Dad, and it left the door open for the future. Maybe someday I'd have a son of my own, or maybe I'd mentor someone who needed a second chance the way I did. The day we opened, I didn't expect a crowd. But people came. Old customers from the shop, friends from class, a few neighbors. One of Dad's fishing buddies even showed up with a cooler of Rainier beer and said he'd be damn proud. I believed him. Business started slow but steady. I had repeat customers by the 3rd week. One woman brought her Camry in for an oil change and told me she was glad someone in town was finally doing honest work again. Funny how simple words can mean so much. Then one afternoon, a silver Lexus pulled into the lot. I knew it before she even stepped out. Greta. Her hair was thinner, dyed too dark for her face. She wore oversized sunglasses and a stiff blazer that screamed "I still matter." She walked around like she was inspecting property. Didn't even glance at the shop signage until she was directly underneath it. Her face gave nothing away. I was working under the hood of an old Ford when she approached. I didn't look up until she said, "Nice place." I wiped my hands with a rag and nodded. "Didn't think you had it in you," she added, scanning the garage. I didn't take the bait. She lingered. "I got dropped from another reality group last month. Word still gets around, even now. Can't shake the church money thing." I stayed silent. "And Sadie," she chuckled softly. "She blames me, you know. Says I ruined her life." I waited. "She's working in a call center now. Says she's taking a break, but we both know she hit her ceiling." Still, I said nothing. Not out of spite. I just didn't owe her anything anymore. Greta glanced back at the sign one more time. "Your father would have liked this." Then, softer, "He'd have been proud." That stopped me. Not because I needed to hear it from her. But because she said it. No edge, no bitterness. For the first time in my life, it felt like she wasn't performing. She reached into her purse and pulled out a check. $5,000. "For your shop," she said. "Call it investment. Or guilt. Doesn't matter." I didn't move. "You're going to tear it up, aren't you?" she asked. I took the check, folded it, and slid it into my back pocket. "No," I said. "I'm going to frame it." Her eyebrows lifted. "I want a reminder," I said. "Of everything I built in spite of you." She blinked, and for once, didn't have a comeback. She turned and walked away, slower than she'd arrived. I watched the Lexus drive off. I never cashed the check. But I did frame it. Hung it in the break room, right next to a photo of me and Dad holding a string of fish from that trip to the Hood Canal in '98. Every time I see it, I remember the truth: revenge doesn't always look like fire and fury. Sometimes, it looks like thriving in the exact way they swore you never would. I still get calls from Sadie now and then. Never from her number, always blocked. Once, she left a voicemail asking if we could talk, just as friends. I didn't respond. I don't need to. Her voice has no weight anymore. The thing about people like Sadie and Greta, they need an audience. They feed off the performance. When you stop clapping, when you walk off the stage, the lights dim. They shrink. And you? You get to build a life in the quiet. A good one. A free one. On the first anniversary of Dad's death, I closed the shop early. I brought his favorite cookies, a folding chair, and a thermos of black coffee to the cemetery. I sat there and told him everything. How I made it. How I finally found peace. And how I did it without turning into the person they wanted me to be, or the one they feared I could become. I told him I was okay. And this time, I meant it with my whole chest.